You have to pay sales tax. Well, that's a complicated thing, but and yes, you do. I want to give you the solutions first. So the first solution, especially for people who are starting out, is if you sell on Etsy or eBay and you use those to take your money, you're probably just completely covered already because Etsy and eBay automatically collect sales tax and pay it for you. They call it remitting it for you. Now, if you use other platforms like Squarespace or Shopify or things like that, there are ways to calculate it and complex formulas for doing it, and they also have services for doing that. But the good news is, since the sales tax rules are very variable, there is something called a nexus, a tax nexus, and you'd have to consult with a tax expert to find out what it is because it goes from state to state. But the general rule of thumb that I found on Reddit and other sources is that you pay sales tax in the state that you live in, and only if you sell over $100,000 worth of inventory in that state, or you make 200 transactions there in a year. And so you may need to get a sales tax, register with the state to do all that. So the third takeaway that I want you to get is it's probably not a good idea to pay for or to get add-ons with Squarespace and Shopify. They're constantly trying to sell you extra services you don't need. And so I suppose the fourth thing that's the most important is the biggest and best solution is if you're making a lot of money off of your sales, let's say you're making 70,000 a year, just pay a couple of $100 and consult with a tax expert. And I've prepared a list of questions for you, and you can ask them what you should do. And so I've got a list of questions. It's a PDF for you that you can, cut and paste or get on the phone with them or meet with them and take detailed notes about it. All right. So let me go through this in more depth and more detail. Taxes are really confusing, and if it's confusing for you like it was for me, it really will pay for you to hire a consultant because it turns out I was paying too much the sales tax over the years, and I'll go into anecdotes about that. So here's some of the details. So I thought that I needed to pay sales tax on everything that I sold in the state of California. And what I didn't realize was because I had asked casually my tax person who was doing my federal income tax that, well, should I pay sales tax? And she suggested that I do. And so one of the ways that I did it was I signed up for an account using my social security number and registered with the state and figured out what the amount of sales tax was every year. And I did some stupid things in terms of paying double because I didn't really realize that Etsy and eBay were already paying for my sales tax, and I also didn't know about the Nexus stuff. So again, one more time, hire a consultant because they will actually limit your exposure both in terms of legality stuff and also in terms of taxes. So my mistakes were I was selling at that time about $70,000 a year, but I was selling all over the country and internationally. So I paid between $100 and $300 each quarter in sales tax to the state of California, and I had this complex formula that I really enjoyed. It was like a sort of algebra problem to try to figure out, but it turns out that I didn't need to do any of that because I was mostly covered already and I wasn't selling enough stuff. All right, so there are formulas for calculating your sales tax if you're making over $100,000 a year. And the bottom line is what you want to do is you want to take your gross sales from all of your sources. That means what was paid into PayPal, what was paid into Etsy, what was paid into Squarespace, what you collected out of studio sales, and then you want to figure out how many of those sales and what the amount was in your home state. And then that gives you the two numbers that you need to be able to calculate your taxes. And usually the sales tax site for the state will give you the formula and you plug it directly into your form. But remember, it's probably only if you're earning $100,000 a year or if you're making 200 sales a year in that state. So again, this is not to be construed as legal advice, but you should really consult somebody. So let me talk about the different platforms and some things that you could do in terms of paying your sales tax, because this is what I do now. For the most part, Etsy just covers everything for you. And I've told you that the fees that Etsy takes can be 10 to 15% of everything. And then if you throw in some sales tax on top of that, I like to work with round numbers. So like, let's say you've sold something for $100. Right off the top, you're losing probably about $15, right? And then your shipping is another 30. So now we're at $45 right there. And that's almost 50%. So that's kind of a big chunk. So what you need to do is just add another $50 onto the sale price and not charge for shipping. Squarespace, Square, and PayPal, they will not pay the taxes for you, and they will try to sell you a bunch of services. That's why I started looking into this, because it freaked me out. I got an email from Squarespace where they were trying to sell me an additional service for tracking my taxes and so on and so forth. There are some independent apps that you can plug into Squarespace. Squarespace now has one that's built in that you can pay extra for. There's another one called TaxJar and some other things that you can use. But in general, you probably don't need that at all. So all of those things will help you to track your sales tax. But I bet you could even drop your finances into a spreadsheet and the monthly spreadsheet and ask AI to do it for you. So that is the skinny on sales tax. The takeaways again are it's probably easier and the best bet for you to start first using Etsy or eBay, and that way you don't have to think about it at all until you start really getting some sort of momentum. Then once you are kind of like, let's say, $50,000 to $70,000 a year, then you check out what the economic nexus rules are for your state, either by consulting a tax consultant or an accountant, or by looking it up yourself. And the last thing that I want to give you as the takeaway is do not buy extra services. It's almost better, if you're that freaked out by it, to hire a human being to walk you through it and to actually figure out a spreadsheet to do it.